Hi, I have had multiple people requesting that I do some follow-up videos on my Love Addict series, something that I stopped kind of talking about because I wasn't really experiencing that specifically anymore and I didn't really have anything more to say. But now in retrospect, I would have some things to say. So I do have some videos planned, but I have written so much about it. I mean, just for myself to kind of plan videos, but I'm still trying to figure out how to sort it into like a series. So please stand by. I am actively working on that. And I've had to do a lot of internal digging in order to make those too, because it's all extremely personal and I have to figure out how to communicate that without divulging other people's privacy too much. I am transparent, but I also want to respect the people in my life that my journey has affected, or they've affected me, whether intentionally or not. As you know, when it comes to relationship addiction, other people come into play quite a bit. So on that note, though, I was reading an article today, and if I can find it, I will link it in the description below. But I was reading an article about a woman's theory on mother hunger, a psychologist, and I read the article somewhat. I was busy doing something else, to be honest, but to me it almost seems as though a theory that kind of is a step before the addictive pattern kicks in. So I think the mother hunger, kind of like, she talks about how this is mostly daughters who had some, I guess you'd say, wounding, void, something that they didn't get from their mother. But I've seen this in all genders, and non-genders. I've seen this in every human being. It just comes up differently. But I will say that this also applies to paternal things also. It might just show up differently. But I am familiar with mother hunger from the aspect of I've worked with a lot of women that are young enough to be my daughter. And I always get the feeling, even when I'm communicating with women in their 20s or something, that I'm feeling some kind of a void for them. I'm just someone that's not overly attached. I don't have any kind of bias, and they're able to vent or process serious or intimate things, private things with me, and get that wisdom or insight that they would get from a maternal archetype, the nurturing that they need to feel seen and heard. And I love it, but there's also some guilt and shame around it, because I also know that as a mother of a now grown-up son who has his own daughter, that I've also created this wound for my son, inadvertently, unintentionally, of course, and a lot of times that's the case. I know that was the case with my parents too. They didn't intentionally do anything to hurt me or to make me feel abandoned or their emotional unavailability. They had no idea. I still don't know that they completely understand that, and that's okay. I'm not worried about that now, but it still has set the tone for my patterns and how I go about life. And I think that it's important to talk about this more, because I feel like there are a lot of people out there that it's important they recognize they have this. Maybe it's a void, or I don't know how they would describe it. I think everybody's experience is different and who they are is different, so they may describe it differently. But there's this missing piece, this nurturing, this archetypal experience that they project onto relationships. So they expect a romantic partner, or they expect friends or somebody to fill that void, and when they're not doing it, or when it starts to become toxic and codependent because they need too much from that person, then that's when it becomes problematic and unhealthy for everyone involved. So if we discussed it more, then maybe we would not project this need onto other people unknowingly, because when we aren't aware of it, we have no control over it. It just consumes everything and we don't even realize it. But the more we're aware of ourselves, then the more we can keep that in check and really see what it is that we need in that moment. And where can we get a healthy outlet for that outside of, getting professional help, because obviously I'm going to say that's a very important step. But there's also everyday life, And I have to say that I know that I have represented this for different people, even people who've watched my videos. And I'm not like an active mother. I'm not actively mothering anyone now. And I haven't even met my granddaughter yet because she's in another country. So, and I'm not old enough to be a crone per se yet, or this age. And I struggle with these in-between moments because I'm always anticipating something, my own trauma response, the expectations, and I'll go into that more as to how it played out in my relationships in my life later. But I think that I keep thinking about how, what transition am I in? Like everybody talks about the mother, maiden, and crone, but what about when you're in between? You don't feel like you're young enough to be called a maiden, but you also aren't a mother or mothering anyone. You may have a pet, or you might step into that nurturing archetype, but you don't have a child, so it doesn't resonate with you entirely. Maybe it does, because like I said, you have a pet or someone you're caring for. But there's these in-betweens, and I'm in the in-between. What do I call myself? Am I a moan? Am I of course that's where I go first. Or am I there's something else I thought of that made me laugh because I crack me up. But how do I marry mother and crone to when you're in the in-between? So any suggestions on that would be great, because I'd like to include that in my writing and videos in this stage of life, because I'm going to talk more about that too. This stage of life is very interesting because you kind of flail, and when you've lived your life flailing, not knowing how to really land on anything, you'd think you'd be more comfortable in the in-between. So that's still a challenge for me. So I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you being patient as I bring these videos together. I'd be more than happy to take into account any comments, suggestions, questions that you have. And I'll be posting a lot more again soon. Fingers crossed.